is the worst podcast I've ever been on.
These guys are shit. It's true. It's true.
This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Our traveling fanboys, 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 our traveling fanboys.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a full episode of the Hard Traveling Fanboys. Can you believe
I don't know
it?
what that is.
I don't know either, Nick. It's been so long. I am Greg Phillips. He is Nick Duke. And we are coming to you back from Ho Ho Loon Plaza in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Nick, it's been a while since we've done an actual full-length episode, has it not?
Yeah, it feels like it's been, oh man. It was 2019 last time we did one of these,
God.
it feels like.
Been that long?
Yep.
Oh, wow. You know, well, maybe like Foreigner, it'll feel like the first time.
Feels like the very first time. Hell, it may feel like the last time. I don't know.
It very well might. Hey, we're getting close.
We'll have to address that at some point. But today is not that point, I suppose.
End of the show?
Wait a minute now. Don't be telling tales out of school.
No. But nonetheless, we are happy to be back beaming into your living rooms, cars, toilets, wherever you have us, wherever you're listening to us right now. We are continuing Arrow Month, a month-long tribute to the CW's television series Arrow. And funny things happened along the way, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the episode as a result of last week's episode. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how that's affected our appreciation of the show and all that great stuff. But it really is a month-long celebration of what Greg Berlanti, Marc Guggenheim, and company have done with the character of Oliver Queen and with the universe that they've built around that character, which actually just, appropriately enough, Nick, for the purposes of the podcast, just kind of sort of halfway wrapped up this past week with Crisis on Infinite Earths finale. And, of course, we've got one more Oliver Queen story left to go. But let's kind of get right into it, I guess. It's going to be a fun episode because we decided to bring you a Longbook Hunters episode. This, of course, is our monthly look at a trade paperback graphic novel collection. And this month, we decided to, appropriately enough, take a look at a tie-in comic to the Arrow television series. And DC first started publishing an Arrow tie-in comic parallel to the first season of the show. I think about halfway through they started publishing one. This is available on DC Universe. The application is actually how we read it, but you can obviously get the trades of this as well. We actually skipped the entire first quote-unquote season of the Arrow comic because they were kind of, after doing a little research, parallel stories to the show that weren't necessarily tied into the show. So you have the characters from Arrow on television, but they were doing kind of missions that didn't have anything to necessarily do with what they were doing on air. What we're going to is a story called Arrow Season 2.5, and it is, as the title indicates, smashed between the end of Season 2 and the beginning of Season 3 of the hit show Arrow. This was, of course, when the show was really firing on all cylinders, coming off what many consider to be its best season to date. And I thought it would be good to take a look at this because after doing some research, apparently a lot of stuff that happens in the beginning of Season 3 is kind of explained in this comic book series. And also, it's got a pretty interesting list of creators involved in it, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But in particular, we are looking at the first 12 issues of this series, which started as a web-only series. And as a result, the panels and the pages are actually shorter and smaller than what you would expect in a normal comic. Nick, you can kind of talk a little bit more about that, about kind of what the nature was of this comic when it was initially published.
Yeah, so at the time, DC had an actual, and if you go on DC Universe and read any of these, you'll see at the end of each issue kind of promoting DC's digital slate at the time, where every day of the week was a different digital comic. And these were released, I want to say they were done weekly. And the idea was to do these little short, about half the length of a normal comic, books that would come out, like I said, every week. You had, at the time, you had this, you had Flash Season 0, you had, what else did you have going on? You had Batman 66, which was what I was reading at the time, Injustice, a few others. I think there was a tie into that Infinite Crisis MMO game as well. That was all being done around that time. And the strategy was you would release 2 of these, and then the 2 of the digital comics would be collected together into one physical print edition. So essentially, 2 issues of digital would equate to 1 issue of print, and that's how I was buying Batman 66 at the time, as I was waiting for the collected printed editions and reading those. So yeah, we read 12 issues of this, which roughly equates to 6 issues of a normal comic.
Correct. And this is a tie-in comic, so there were pretty, from my standpoint anyway, Nick, I had pretty low expectations heading into this one because it is a tie-in comic, and traditionally those have been not very good. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, this was coming out at the same time as the Injustice comic, and I think we all were pretty well, those of us who have read any of it anyway,
right,
were blown away kind of by the quality of that. And then also, for what it was, Batman 66 around this era was really good as well. So, but you're right, for the most of the existence, the tie-in comics, whether they tie into movies, games, or shows or what have you, have been really bad. But this felt like, you know, even though that's, it's not saying much, this is kind of the golden age of the tie-in comic, 2012 to 2014.
Yeah, you're right. And one of the reasons why we're going to get into this comic, why this kind of does stand out as being a little bit different than your normal tie-in comic, is that it directly involves the creators and the people who were actually writing the television show at that time. Primarily, in this case, Marc Guggenheim, who is one of the founders of Arrow, the executive producer of the Arrowverse, the guy that is kind of the shepherd of Crisis on Infinite Earths, which we just watched. He's been involved in this show from the beginning. As one of the main writers and producers. And also Keto Shimizu. She was one of the primary writers of Arrow during seasons 2 and 3, which is where, of course, this comic book takes place right in the middle of those 2 seasons. So right away, Nick, I think it's a good sign that you've got people that are familiar with these characters as they appear on the screen and are familiar with the pacing of the television show doing the writing here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the biggest thing that we can say about this. We'll talk about the plot a little bit, I'm sure, but the biggest thing in favor of this comic is that when you read it, it sounds like the characters from the television show. Felicity sounds like TV Felicity. Yep. Oliver sounds like TV Oliver. Diggle sounds like TV Diggle, and so on and so forth. None of these voices feel entirely out of sorts, as they often do with other tie-in comics where people who don't have the voices of those characters mastered can. I
can tell you, I've read many tie-in comics over my years as a kid, especially back in the 90s and early 2000s, where the characters sound you could not imagine the actors that play those characters saying those things, if that makes sense.
Right.
And that's not the case here. All of the characters feel natural. They feel like you could see or hear their television actors delivering these lines, and even see with the facial expressions them delivering these scenes. And that comes in with the art, which has some pretty heavy hitters also for a tie-in comic. That's another thing that stands out about this. These are not necessarily... Now, these weren't A-list people at the time, but Joe Bennett is their primary artist throughout these 12 issues. And, of course, he's gone on to great fame through his run on Deathstroke alongside Christopher Priest. And, of course, Szymon... I don't know how to pronounce his name right. It's spelled Szymon. Maybe it's just Szymon Kudranski, who had a brief run on the Green Lantern series Emerald Warriors, if you remember that one, Nick. I believe he was one of the artists on that for a while. That was the one that had Guy Gardner as the lead back in the very end of the Jeff Johns era.
Right.
And so these are not your run-of-the-mill kind of people that are just looking for a gig to get their foot in the door doing a tie-in comic. These are pretty established and good, talented artists who are working on sort of mimicking the facial expressions and the clothing and the technology of the television show, working alongside two writers from the television show. So I think it's a good foundation on which to build a book. And for me anyway, like you said, regardless of whatever the plot was going to be, when you're starting out with strong characters, that helps you no matter what you're doing. And I liked being able to, in particular, I think what stood out to me the most was Felicity. And particularly this is early season Felicity. And it's like, it's no shock why she was such a hit character, because her dialogue is just so on point and fast and quippy but smart. Her character just feels like it stands out amongst the crowd to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and plus this is playing off one of my favorite eras of the show. You know, you and I have both railed against the will they, won't they in most situations, but we have to look back on it now knowing how it all played out and that we eventually got what we wanted and acknowledge that the will they, won't they was pretty damn fun. This was a pretty great era of Oliver and Felicity, with the sexual tension that was constantly being teased and Felicity's awkward comments and stuff, and it was kind of cool to revisit that. Totally
agreed. So what is the plot of this comic book 2.5? Well, at the end of season 2, Oliver and his friends, they have fended off the invasion, the siege, if you will, by Deathstroke and his army of Mirakuru influenced warriors. And Deathstroke has been imprisoned, the city has been saved, but all has not been retained. The status quo is no longer what it was. Oliver has lost control of his company, Queen Consolidated. He's running out of money rapidly. His mother is dead. His sister is on sabbatical with her evil biological father, Malcolm Merlin. And so a lot has been going on in the lives of these characters. Roy Harper has now become a full-fledged member of Team Arrow. He is assisting Oliver Queen as the new, if you will, the new Speedy on the team. Now that Thea is training with Malcolm back in Corto Maltese in South America. I'm trying to think of the other status quo aspects that are sort of up in the air at this point. Felicity and Oliver are continuing their, as Nick put it, their will they, won't they sort of flirtation with one another. Diggle has a baby on the way with his wife, Lila Michaels. She is expecting and actually pretty close to delivery at this time. So his attention is divided between the team and his wife, obviously. And Sarah Lance is traveling the world as an assassin with the League of Assassins alongside her girlfriend, Nissa Al Ghul. And amidst all of this, there is the death of Sebastian Blood, who was sort of a local politician, a miniature cult leader, and as it turned out in the end, a henchman of sorts for Deathstroke. And he has died, but now there is a new Brother Blood haunting the streets of Star City. And this Brother Blood is more along the lines of the comic book Brother Blood in that he is a religious zealot. And when the story begins, we don't actually know who this religious zealot is, who this new Brother Blood is, but we do know that he is attracting mentally unstable individuals to his cause, people that are prone to religious exploitation. The poor and the destitute of Star City are being recruited by this handsome man named Caleb that works for Brother Blood, and it's this cult that's sort of growing within the city, and they're committing increasingly violent acts around the city to sort of send their message of religious zealotry, similar to what you would see with the comic book Brother Blood. But of course, as it often is in these situations, there's a personal vendetta at stake here, in that this new Brother Blood, and this isn't too much of a spoiler because it's revealed fairly early in the comic, this new Brother Blood is actually a character named Clinton Hogue, who had been interrogated by Felicity and Diggle in Season 2. He was an underling underneath Brother Blood, the original Brother Blood, and had been sort of emasculated and humiliated by Felicity and Diggle, and is really basically at its core, this is a revenge story for him, but he's using the guise of religious zealotry to sort of inspire people to his side. So that's where we stand right now as this story begins. It's really the premise is this new brother blood and how the team is going to take this new brother blood down and combat his forces. And in the meantime, the team coming to grips with things such as the comatose state of Detective Lance at the end of season 2 after being shot. Roy Harper struggling to adjust to being a superhero and how that's going. Sarah Lance struggling with being an assassin and coming back to town. Are you an Athethan? Or are you an errand boy?
Errand girl in this case.
Errand girl in this case. And Oliver, of course, trying to hold everything together and battling his innate nature, which is to be a loner, but while also trying to do so within the confines of a team. So that's your status quo. Did I leave anything out, Nick?
Not that I can think of. It's all pretty good. Roy, as you said, is very newly become Speedy or Red Arrow or whatever you want to call him. Really, I forget what they actually
call him. Speedy at the beginning of this one. He would eventually become Arsenal.
Which is weird because he also called Thea Speedy.
Right,
so,
that's his nickname for Thea. Yeah, I thought the same thing. That was one thing that did cause me to pause a little because I was like, well, it's kind of weird because that's his nickname for Thea, but it made sense when she comes back. Because on the show, if I remember correctly, they end up calling Roy Arsenal. They just skip straight to being Arsenal. And
wait a minute, I thought it was Arsenal. I don't remember.
I don't remember either. But luckily, we'll have a solution to that based on what we're doing in our free time. But yes, yes, and so and of course, Thea is in Corto Maltese, undergoing rather violent training with Malcolm Merlin.
If I have a complaint about this book, and I don't know how heavy you want to get into the structure of it this early, but as much as I enjoyed the Suicide Squad parts, I almost wish they had been replaced by Merlin and Thea stuff because I found that vastly more.
I agree, and actually, that's an interesting point you bring up because I actually did not mention that the starting in issue 2 or 3 of this, I can't remember which one. The backup stories in this comic,
which is especially interesting because again, these are only 12 pages. So backup stories in these are only you only get 2 pages. So every 2 pages you got to have a cliffhanger. And so it kind of reminded me of if anybody has ever listened to the BBC radio adaptation of Nightfall.
Yes. Where
they took Nightfall and adapted it, but they aired it on the radio in 3-minute segments. So every 3 minutes of this 2-hour production, it's this big dramatic thing happening, and it's like Michael Cole pitching to a commercial break on Raw every 3 minutes. What's going to happen as Nightfall rolls on?
Yeah. Is Benedict Asp going to kill Chandra Kinsolving? Find out next week, folks.
Right. So the Suicide Squad story kind of read that way to me.
Yeah. What it reminded me of, Nick, were the Spider-Man newspaper strips.
Oh, there you go.
If you remember those, they were laid out very much the same way. But yeah, so there's backup stories involving the Suicide Squad, which is, and this is the most interesting part of these Suicide Squad backups, Nick. We get an Arrowverse take on Black Adam. As a sort of reimagined for the Arrowverse, which is more gritty and grounded, reimagined as a jihadist, essentially, a religious terrorist in the Middle East, who is, but instead of being a Muslim, he is dedicated to the old gods.
You pronounce Muslim the same way Muhammad Ali did in the Will Smith movie.
And in real life, by the way. What can I say? I've seen a lot of Muhammad Ali documentaries.
I ain't praying to no blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus.
But nonetheless, he is dedicated to the old gods, and or at least that's his what he purports. And this he's known as Kim Adam, which is in the comics is Black Adam's actual name. And he is, just an absolute unabashed terrorist. He is kidnapping children, kidnapping women, and selling them off to, not selling them off, but giving them away to his generals as wives, torturing people, murdering people. doing this in the name of the old gods, and he claims to have been granted powers by them, that he cannot be harmed by bullets, that he cannot be injured in any way, that he is magic, and so nobody believes this is true, obviously, but he is a bad guy here, and so that's kind of the premise of this backup, is that Diggle gets sent in with the Suicide Squad to Kahndaq to sort of overthrow Black Adam, and he does this alongside Deadshot, Bronze Tiger, and a new character that is the deposed former military leader of Kahndaq, and I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head, sadly. But nonetheless, I agree with you, Nick. I did find the Black Adam parts very fascinating because it was such a different take on the character than I'm used to, and I thought that was cool. But
yeah, because we're kind of accustomed to the modern interpretation of the anti-hero,
right,
like this guy who is almost like a DC version of Namor the Submariner, where he's militant in terms of protecting his homeland, but that really is his ultimate goal at the end of the day, is to ensure the safety of his people. There are no redeeming qualities to this version of Black Adam.
This guy is unabashedly the worst. And a very interesting thing happens in this backup, which is the death, the sort of off-screen, if you will, death of Bronze Tiger, which I remember complaining about at the time because I had not read Arrow Season 2.5, but I guess it does give the book a little bit of weight. Now, this would be undone later on by Flashpoint, apparently. I looked that up online. That I was like, well, how did he come back from this? Apparently, they explained it away with Flashpoint, that was one of the effects of it, is that Ben Turner never died. But yeah, they kill off a minor character, granted, but a character nonetheless in Arrow 2.5 in these backup stories. But I agree with you, Nick. I would have rather seen more of Malcolm and Thea training, particularly because by the time Season 3 starts, as my memory serves, Thea's training has already pretty much completed, or close to it.
Yeah, they show up in Corto Maltese, and there's that great episode where Oliver is trying to talk her into coming back, and we get the idea, we were kind of shown that he has become very proficient, and she's not telling Oliver because Ollie has kept all these secrets from her for so long.
Yeah, exactly. So that in and of itself is very interesting, but we only get very brief glimpses of that here. In the Suicide Squad backup, we get some glimpses of Diggle and Lila's relationship, which is cool, and it does bleed over a little bit to the main story. But really, all that Suicide Squad stuff probably could have been packed into that two-parter that they did at the end. Don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the other thing, is like, this is collected. There is a trade out there of this that collects the first 12 issues, and as far as the main Arrow storyline, it kind of ends unresolved. Like, you have to go find the rest of it because Felicity has been kidnapped, and there's all this stuff going on that hasn't really been settled as of the ending of this, because they spend the last two issues entirely on wrapping up the Suicide Squad story. So, again, the Suicide Squad story wasn't bad, but to me, it felt like it just served as a distraction from everything else that was going on, and you probably could have told a more complete story had that not been included, and just had the next arc of the comic been the Suicide Squad stuff.
Right, and they could have we could have just seen Diggle getting sent on a mission here, and then they could retroactively go back in the next story arc and show us why Diggle went away on a mission, and set us in that regard. So that was really done to take Diggle off the table, I guess, but nonetheless, but the actual main story here is interesting. Somebody has picked up the Brother Blood mask. It's not Sebastian Blood. Who is it, and why? What is their motivation? Roy Harper gets nearly murdered at the beginning of the comic, which leads later on leads to a great line from Sarah Lance, of all people, that he seems to spend a lot of time in a coma. Felicity says it too, actually, first, where she's like, "You sure do spend a lot of time. I spend a lot of time behind the computer talking to them on monitors. You spend a lot of time in comas." And so Roy is in a bad way for much of this comic. He's been injured, and as a result, Oliver and Diggle arranged for him to get his first true superhero suit. That now he's going to get a suit just like Oliver that has Kevlar lining that will presumably protect him from weapons. What did you make of the usage of Roy Harper in this book?
It was good early on, but then he's gone because he's in a coma for a big chunk of it. One thing that's also interesting is they spend that opening action sequence of them like hanging off the side of a plane. And I almost wonder if they were doing things in the comic because they knew there was no way they would be able to make it look good on the show.
I definitely got that. That feeling with that airplane shot, and even some of the stuff in Kondak as well with the Suicide Squad stuff. I think they were really, and also think about this: some of the characters that show up. We see the Huntress in a dream sequence form. We see Robert Queen. We see all these figures from Oliver's past. Tommy shows up, and just think about it. In a comic, you don't have to worry about signing an actor to a contract and getting him to come on your set and paying him money to do this. You can just have the character appear. So pretty wise on the parts of Guggenheim and Shimizu to utilize some of these things that they would not be able to utilize on a CW budget.
Absolutely. I mean, that's very accurate, I think.
So and I thought the usage of the characters is pretty. Roy spends most of the time in the coma. We get a lot of Oliver, a pretty good amount of Felicity, a pretty good amount of Diggle, a lot of Diggle actually, which is good. And then I thought one of the stars of this comic for me, Nick, and we were talking about this on the phone earlier, but was Sarah Lance, who shows up. This is right before she gets killed in the beginning of season 3, remember? And she is the Black Canary, or she's just the Canary at this point. And she shows up to Star City just in the nick of time. She saves Oliver, who has been drugged by Werner Zeidel, who of course we know is the next Count Vertigo. And she pretty much kicks Oliver's ass in a fight that they have while he's in a drug state. She's just a badass, Nick. And I was telling you this. One thing this comic did was remind me of how instantly good the character of Sarah Lance was as the Canary. To this day, we've both talked about how Katie Cassidy's done a great job in the last couple seasons of rehabbing her on-screen character as Black Siren. However, to this day, I don't think they've had a better interpretation of Black Canary than they had with Sarah Lance in season 2 of Arrow.
Let me offer up something of a theory. And I understand that you can't literally do this, but I feel like it's almost better to think of Sarah as 2 separate characters.
Yep.
There is the Sarah that appears on Legends of Tomorrow who kind of acts and behaves one way.
Yep.
And makes reference to her past on Arrow. But remember, even after she moved to Legends full-time and would occasionally pop back over to Arrow for a guest appearance, the 2 writing staffs just treat her as completely different characters, which is fine because the tone of Legends is meant to be upbeat and comedic and kind of quippy and have just a different feel to it. But when she appears on Arrow, she really gets to lean into her tragic past and get to display a little bit more emotional weight. And so we haven't seen that in a while, and I think it was fun to see that here in this comic. You're right, because White Canary and Black Canary, as we talk about Sarah Lance, 2 totally different characters almost. And in most instances, we would criticize that. We would criticize writing staffs for treating characters completely differently. But in this case, it kind of works.
I agree. And what I was telling you earlier is I know that it probably wouldn't be worth it because we probably wouldn't have gotten Legends of Tomorrow if they had done this. But in hindsight, if they were to have kowtowed to the fan expectations of Green Arrow and Black Canary, it would have made a lot more sense to just leave Sarah alive and leave her as the Black Canary because she's amazing. She's very much like the comic book Black Canary that you would expect. Badass, really funny dialogue, like just her stoic dialogue, completely confident. That's the other thing that stands out about her character and the writing of all the women in this comic. But she's so confident in who she is and is portrayed as a physical equal to Oliver, which is, I thought, really cool given that Oliver is the ultimate badass of the show. So, I love the usage of her. She's only here for 2 issues, but in those 2 issues, she manages to do a lot and be a huge driver of the action and gets a great scene with her dad. Was he still Captain Lance at that time, or was he still Detective Lance? I can't remember, but he wakes up from his coma with his 2 daughters there by his bed, and I thought that was actually one of the best scenes in the comic. Because it was written, did you not read it in his voice? Like even the way it was written, like his sort of dialect and his way of speaking. I thought that was a really good usage of him.
Yeah, absolutely. But that just goes back to the fact that because you've got the creative team involved from the show, all these characters read like their television counterparts. Nobody sounds out of sorts, and so Lance is just another example of that.
Yeah, and so I enjoyed seeing him and seeing their interactions. Laurel is kind of, kept to the side for the most of this story arc, which is probably good, and at this time, and the overall dynamic of the team is really good. And of course, we see the driving action as Oliver gets himself, even though he's injured, for most of this story, Oliver has a separated shoulder that he suffers in the very first issue, and he's kind of got his arm in a sling, and ends up running afoul of Brother Blood and his minions. Sarah saves him the first time. Diggle helps him out, and then they have to kind of fight their way out against this gaggle of individuals. But ultimately, Brother Blood ends up kidnapping Felicity, as you alluded to earlier, and which has some funny dialogue involved in it. And Roy and Oliver, as we end the story, are taking off to sort of see if they can rescue her. So I'm really interested, Nick, to see what happens after this and see how they bridge from this comic into that first episode of season 3. Which what I'm thinking about doing is going ahead and doing my, as we'll talk about later, my rewatch of the show, and then when I get to the point at the end of season 2, picking this back up and seeing how it all ends, because it's a really breezy read. I mean, you know how long it takes me to read stuff, and I read through this very easily and very quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's by design. They wanted people to be able to kind of swipe through it on their phone pretty quickly. It is a quick read and an entertaining read, though. I mean, this isn't, we don't want to oversell it. It's not like the best thing we've ever read, but for what it is, it's pretty damn good. And maybe that's because our expectations were so low coming in. I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, you're not going to read this, and when you read this, you're not going to say that's the best Green Arrow story I've ever read in the comic. No, not even close. You're not going to say this is Quiver, or this is this is the Jeff Lemire Green Arrow, or this is the Adams and O'Neill Green Arrow. But what you're going to do is you're going to say this is probably one of the best tie-in comics that I've read to a TV show, certainly. And you're going to come away with information that actually helps you process things that happen on the show. We find out how Roy Harper gets his superhero costume in between seasons. We find out the nature of the dynamic between some of these characters. You find out where Sarah's been right before the events of season 3, as Sarah ends up actually getting involved in the Suicide Squad subplot. You find out where Nyssa is. You find out where Ra's al Ghul's involvement is, or Ra's al Ghul, whatever you want to say, what his involvement is as we get into season 3. You find out where Diggle's been, what he's been up to, and why the dynamics are what they are between he and Amanda Waller, who is the head of Argus. So there's a lot of things that sort of provide background information here that actually can enhance your understanding of what happens on the show. So I would give this a recommendation, Nick. I think if you're a fan of Arrow, and or if you're just now becoming a fan of Arrow and you're watching the series from the beginning on Netflix, when you get to the end of season 2, I think this is a good thing to pick up. It won't take you long to read, and sort of read through this one to set up before you start season 3.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea for sure. Again, having not seen seasons 2 or 3 in a while, I'm not really sure how much missing material you feel like there might be, but I can't see how this could hurt.
Right. So there you have it, folks. We were actually fans of this one. The art by Bennett in particular, I thought was really strong. Which most things by anyone named Bennett are pretty good, particularly when it comes to the steam pipe industry. But in this case, the artist Joe Bennett does a really good job of rendering these characters, and yeah, so I just wanted to stop and talk about the art, because I realized we hadn't really mentioned that much, but everybody pretty much looks like who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, that's accurate. Pretty good job of art here. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but again, this isn't trying to be high art.
Exactly. And so with that being said, let us know your thoughts on this. We want you to give it a read and tell us what you thought about the Arrow season 2.5. You can find it on DC Universe. You can also find it at local comic shop, local bookstores. They'll probably have this trade sitting around. I've seen it around a lot. Give it a read. It's not a bad read at all. And let us know what your thoughts are on the Place to Be Nation Comics Facebook page. We'll share this show and Hopefully give us some feedback. We haven't gotten much in quite a while, but nonetheless, hope you will give us some. And we will share it on Twitter and let us know that at gphillips8652, at nickduke87. And in the meantime, we're going to take a little break, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to talk more about Arrow. We're going to talk about the Arrowverse in particular. We're going to talk about some of our current watching projects and just a little bit more about our love for the Berlanti universe here. And so stick with us. When we come back, we'll have all that and a little bit more.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Place to Be Nations, JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have over 24 podcasts available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. We now offer them to you on 2 great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation Wrestling feed, we dive into topics running the gamut from today's WWE to the glory days of yesteryear and the ins and outs of the territory days. In addition to our full-length shows, we also deliver to you special pod blasts on topics old and new.
The Place to Be Nation Pop feed is a veritable treasure trove of great content, offering tremendous shows covering the land of movies, television, life, comics, and sports, brought to you by the most knowledgeable and insightful folks in the podcast world.
You can find all these great shows, plus archives of our past podcasts from over the past 8 years as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while you're there, be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All of these shows, plus others, available on PlaceToBeNation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth stretch projects, and much more. Be sure to support our site by using www.PlaceToBeNation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping. We want to thank our friends at Boneheads Wing Bar, ProWrestlingOnly.com, and HistoryOfWrestling.com as well. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
And welcome back, ladies and listeners, to our traveling fanboys. And that was a weird segue. But nonetheless, we are back, and we hope you enjoyed all of the advertisements for the great shows across the Place to Be Nation family. And we are here to bring you, without any further ado... Remember the old column on the blog of Doom, Tom Cruise's Adieu or Die? I remember it.
I don't.
Well, it was good. Anyway, those were the days. Anyway, we're here to bring you the news and notes around the world of comics. It's a segment known in New Zealand as the Rundown.
Welcome to the Rundown, where we talk some comic news. Welcome to the Rundown, where we talk about movies too.
Big stories recently, Nick, all around the bend here in the world of comics, and we're gonna hit them. We're gonna hit them up right here, there. What do you think about that, there, Nick?
Johnny Bag of Glass.
Yeah, it's just a bag of glass, you know. Yeah, what's the problem, eh? James Gunn, it has come out, has reportedly turned down the chance to direct a Superman movie. This is according to James Gunn. He turned down the chance to make a Superman movie in favor of the Suicide Squad sequel/reboot that he's working on. The exact quote from James Gunn says, "As has been reported many times, DC offered me whatever film I wanted to do, including some sort of Superman movie, not specifically Man of Steel 2, as I've seen reported. I chose the Suicide Squad because it's one of my favorite properties in the world. It's the story I wanted to tell more than any other." Quite frankly, Nick, doesn't James Gunn seem like a much better fit for the Suicide Squad anyway than he would for Superman?
Yeah, I wouldn't really want him making a Superman movie. He's a great filmmaker, but when you're making these things, you kind of want a good marriage of tone and character, which I know you shout me down for, but that's neither here nor there. But I mean, you can make an argument that I think that James Gunn making a Superman movie would be akin to Taika Waititi making these Thor movies, where a lot of people would probably like them, and they would probably be really good movies, but you would probably feel some element of, I I don't know. There would be a bit of uneasiness on your part as a massive Superman fan.
Perhaps a feeling of inauthenticity.
Right.
That's perhaps fair, Nick. That's perhaps a fair and guided point. I thought the same thing. I just felt like I'm not sure that James Gunn would have the passion also for making a Superman movie that he would have for making this sort of ensemble, quirky type movies that he likes to make, you know? So you're probably right about that. So with that being said, our next story also involves movies, and that is Christian Bale returning to the world of superheroes. Can you believe it, Nick? The Dark Knight actor Christian Bale is in talks for an undisclosed role in aforementioned director Taika Waititi's Thor: Love and Thunder. This according to Collider. Love and Thunder will be the fourth Thor film, the second by Taika Waititi. It features Chris Hemsworth, Tessa Thompson, Natalie Portman. But Christian Bale joining the world of the MCU, this is another one that, quite honestly, on the surface, feels like a bit of a weird fit, doesn't it?
It does to an extent. I mean, Christian Bale is kind of thought of as a serious actor, but I mean, he has done things throughout his career that kind of suggest to you he has comedic chops, and that's the one thing is we have to come to terms now, based on not just the tone of Thor Ragnarok, but Taika Waititi's own comments about going bigger and crazier and zanier with Love and Thunder. This is going to be even more of a comedy. So I have been out there on social media with my personal preference being, I think he should absolutely play Dario Agger, a.k.a. the Minotaur, and do it just as Patrick Bateman walking into the Marvel Universe. Like, I would be all for that.
For those that don't know, which would include me, much about Dario Agger, tell us a little bit more about him.
Dario Agger is he is the CEO of the Roxxon Corporation in Jason Aaron's Thor run, and he is an entirely self-involved businessman who cares nothing about nothing or no one other than making himself look good and obtaining corporate power.
So he's basically Patrick Bateman.
He's basically Patrick Bateman, except for the fact that he also has the ability to turn into a giant Minotaur.
Does he like Phil Collins? Do you know that?
You know what? I bet we could find out. Imagine how great of an in joke it would be if we got like a Minotaur action scene set to Susudia.
Oh my god! Oh my god, that would be sensational. I love this idea because when it first came out, people were saying, "Well, is he going to be Throg? Is he going to be the voice of Beta Ray Bill?" I almost said Buffalo Bill. Oh wait, is Volstagg a big old fat person?
Volstagg's dead in the movie.
Oh, that's
universe,
right.
Remember,
a great big fat person. No, never seen him. No, Well, that could be the story though. Volstagg's corpse goes missing, and nobody can figure out what happened to it. Not realizing that when Buffalo Bill shows up, he's wearing Volstagg's skin.
Right.
But no, that's good stuff. So, by the way, the movie I was trying to think of with Christian Bale, where he kind of really showed his comedic chops, was American Hustle, an excellent movie directed by David O. Russell, the Irish hybrid of our friends David and Russell. Yes, a very good movie, by the way. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Well, let's stick with Marvel for a moment and the MCU, because it's not all coming up roses, because apparently Marvel's Doctor Strange director, Scott Derrickson, has actually departed Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness due to creative differences. He thanked Marvel for the collaboration and will remain an executive producer on the film, but ultimately his vision did not match Marvel's vision for this movie. Now, as someone who wasn't a big fan...
Yeah, I think you have more to say on this one than I do.
Well, I was going to say, as someone who wasn't a big fan of the first Doctor Strange movie, I think it's the worst Marvel movie. I've made that clear. Even though I still enjoyed it. It was still an enjoyable film. But it's the lowest on my MCU rankings. This doesn't really break my heart. I feel about this about the same way I felt when... who was the director that walked away from Ant-Man?
Oh, Edgar Wright.
When Edgar Wright walked away from Ant-Man, because I'm not a huge Edgar Wright fan, And in this case, I'm an even less fan of Scott Derrickson's Doctor Strange. So to me, I don't think this is that big a deal. Maybe, the new director will come in, and maybe the new director's sensibilities will be a little more to my liking. That being said, we've both agreed the back part of Doctor Strange is the best part of Doctor Strange and was very promising for the future. But what is your take on this, Nick, as someone who's much higher on the movie? What are your thoughts on Marvel having another prominent dispute with the director?
I don't really mind it, honestly, because all these directors, and I mean, yes, every director has an important job. I'm not trying to say that, but we've said time and time again, when it comes to the MCU, there is really one creative vision steering the entire ship, and that's Kevin Feige. And if this movie is going to be as important to the future of the MCU as we've been led to believe, what with his talk about the multiverse playing such a big role in the next phase of the MCU, then he has to have a director who is in lockstep with his creative vision. And yes, you can criticize Marvel's, somewhat factory or factory line approach to making films, but I don't know. This works for me because I have trust and faith in Feige and in the studio as a larger entity. I would assume this probably came about because Derrickson had been very open about wanting to lean hard into the horror elements of this, and it's kind of hard to do a big epic, superhero movie that sets up future films while also doing a bit of a superhero horror film. So I assume that's what the issue is here, but I have full faith in Feige and Marvel to work something out.
Well, one thing that has clearly been worked out is the relationship between Marvel Studios and Sony Pictures. The first trailer, full-length trailer for the upcoming, believe it or not, the upcoming film Morbius, which is actually happening. They've released the first trailer for Morbius, and in kind of shocking fashion, it appears to be, or at least they want us to believe, that it is set in the same universe as Spider-Man Far From Home and Spider-Man Homecoming. Why do we say this? Because in the trailer, there is both an Easter egg, which is a piece of wall graffiti labeling Spider-Man as a murderer, which appears to be following in the events of Spider-Man Far From Home. And then in the stinger at the end of the trailer, you actually see Morbius interact with Michael Keaton, who presumably is playing the Vulture once again. So it certainly appears on the surface that this may be the first true bridge between the Sony Pictures universe, if you want to call it that, and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's also, for the first time that I can ever remember, Nick, a Sony movie coming out that gives credit to Marvel Studios at the beginning, where it says, in collaboration with Marvel Studios. So it appears that this is in the MCU. We'll see when the movie actually comes out. But before we talk about the trailer itself, which is a different topic entirely, the big story here seems to be this blurring of universes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You and I both speculated openly that when the continuation of Tom Holland and Spider-Man in the MCU deal was reached between Marvel and Sony, that there would be Sony was going to get something out of it. We knew that. We all thought at the time it would be some sort of help with Venom 2 or Tom Holland making a cameo in Venom 2. I don't think any of us considered the possibility that Morbius could be affected because it was so deep into production at that point. And I wonder if perhaps this Vulture scene is not just literally one scene in the movie that is meant to establish the fact that going forward, Sony's Spider films will be firmly set in the same universe. I think that's the case, and you know what? I have no problem with it, because if this is the cost of getting Spider-Man still in the MCU, then hell, do that. Yeah. I don't care. I'm fine.
What's it matter? I mean, that's kind of my take on it. I don't see any negative to this. I guess I suppose the negative could be that if you're the MCU and Morbius comes out and it sucks, and Venom 2 comes out and it sucks, and they've got Marvel Studios in any way attached to these trailers, then it potentially dilutes your brand, which has become the brand of nothing but good movies that Marvel's been putting out. However, on the other side, who cares? Ultimately, it's worth it to get Spider-Man in the MCU. Also, maybe it helps some of these other characters get some exposure. I am of the belief, and always have been of the belief, in any field, whether it's comics, whether it's wrestling, whether it is movies, the only field in which I don't feel this way is in professional sports, that a rising tide lifts all boats. So that if Sony Pictures and their superhero movies are doing well, it's good for everyone else. As fans of these characters, as fans of these universes, we should want all these movies to be good. We should want all these movie universes to be good. We should want DC to succeed, and want Sony to succeed, and want Marvel to keep succeeding. So if this helps Sony find some stable ground for their movies, I'm all for it. Now, let's talk about the trailer itself. What did you think of the trailer?
It was okay. Like, outside of the MCU thing, if we had just watched that trailer, I think we would have all just said, man, that looks like a superhero trailer from 2007. Mm-hmm. You know, like, it looks like a really good mid to late 2000s superhero movie. But as we all know, the bar has kind of been raised, and so the kind of generic feel of this is it does not impress me to a certain extent, but it does look well and competently made. Is I guess the best thing I can say. I'm
on the fence on this thing. I think this is a tale of two trailers largely. I thought the first half of the trailer, maybe the first quarter of the trailer, looked very promising, because I've said from the beginning, Nick, as you remember, I was actually excited about this project when it was first announced, because I thought, here is a chance to do something really different, to do an actual, which there still hasn't been, by the way, in my opinion, an actual superhero horror movie where you've got a prominent comic book character, but it's really more like a body horror film or a character study than it is like an actual superhero movie about this guy named Michael Morbius that has powers. In the first half of this trailer, it appears, does it not, like we're getting a comic book inspired version of Jeff Goldblum's The Fly. That's what it felt like to me. This guy that's got this condition, and he's trying to find a cure for this condition, and he experiments on himself, but the effects of the experiment are not what he expects, and his body starts changing, and he starts changing. I think that's really interesting. I think that story adapted into the world of superheroes and costumes is kind of fascinating, actually. However, the back half of the trailer makes it look like more of a generic superhero movie, where he uses these strange new abilities he has to take down armed gangsters and stuff like that, and also drink their blood, granted. But I kind of feel like I'm hoping it's more of the former and less of the latter. I hope it's more of The Fly style look at a man's at the ill effects of a man trying to play God with his own body, rather than a traditional superhero type. You know, there's a bad guy that he goes after kind of film. What are your thoughts, Nick?
In regards to what exactly?
That aspect. I mean, what do you expect the movie to be, and what would be the most interesting approach on this movie for you?
I mean, like you said, obviously the most interesting approach is the body horror aspect of it. But I wonder, because body horror almost, the antagonist of the film and the protagonist of the film almost become the same person.
Yep.
Right. And so in a superhero movie, there's this expectation that there has to be something for him to fight. You know what I mean? Like, and so I don't know. That would be inarguably the most interesting version to me, but also probably a very risky version for Sony to make. Yeah. And Sony really under their belt in terms of live action. I don't want to discount Into the Spider-Verse, which, as we've discussed numerous times, is a masterpiece. They only really have the one success thus far in this new spin-off film effort. And so they probably feel like they can't afford to take a risk on a version of Morbius that you and I would be more interested in seeing. So that probably leads to a little bit of the generic feel of the trailer to me, is that they've got to try and make this thing that is pleasing to all people.
Right. I wonder if, now that we're in a post-Joker world, if it wouldn't have made sense, you know, in a fantasy scenario where this movie wasn't already in production when Joker came out, if it would have been more likely to be that in a post-Joker world, where you could have, for these, especially for some of these obscure characters they're talking about making movies about, like Silver Sable and people like that, if it doesn't make more sense to do more of a small budget art house, not art house, but more artistic, contemplative type film, rather than your traditional popcorn movie. I don't know, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Well, let's shift back over to DC. I know we're kind of all over the place, but we're saving these last two stories. The last story in particular is the biggest one to us. But before we get to that one, let's talk about a pretty surprising announcement, actually, to me, Nick. We're getting an Aquaman cartoon, if you can believe it. A 3-part Aquaman animated limited series coming to the HBO Max streaming service. It will be executive produced by James Wan and should be tied in with the Aquaman film, and it's called King of Atlantis. It is about Aquaman's first day on the job as the King of Atlantis and his royal advisors, Volko the Scholar and Mira, the water-controlling warrior princess. Sounds pretty damn awesome. What are your thoughts on this, Nick?
It's interesting, though, because if you're telling the first story of Arthur as King of Atlantis, picking up from the last movie, I would kind of assume that's what the
movie would
next live-action movie would be. So, how much material can you actually cover here? Or is there going to be a time jump between Aquaman 1 and Aquaman 2? And if so, is that really the best thing for it? Because I would think, telling the story of how him becoming king is one thing, him being accepted as king is a whole other thing. And I think that's a really, really interesting direction to explore, whether it be in this cartoon or the live-action movie. But you also don't want people to feel like they're lost walking into the next movie if they haven't watched the show, which, as you and I have discussed, is going to be an issue across the board. I mean, Marvel now is saying you're going to have to watch the Disney Plus shows to fully understand the MCU. And if DC is going to take a similar approach, it's about to be a very interesting time in superhero cinematic universes.
I would not take that approach, for the record, if I were DC. I don't think they've earned the cash yet that Marvel has to pull off a power move like that. But, I mean, maybe they will, and if they do, maybe that will carry over to the other property we have to talk about, Nick, which also has a movie in pre-production and, more pressingly, a television show at HBO Max, a live-action television show in pre-production. And that is Green Lantern. Obviously, a property and a character and a universe of characters very special to us. As we learned a few months ago, Greg Berlanti will be executive producing, along with Jeff Johns and others, a Green Lantern TV series for HBO Max. To this point, we've gotten no details about that series. Well, we finally have the first details, as HBO Max head of original content Sarah Aubrey recently mentioned at the Television Critics Association that they are in the early stages of talking to Berlanti about the show, but she added that it will, quote, span several decades and focus on the origin stories of two major Green Lanterns on Earth. She also added that it will feature Sinestro. Nick, does this not sound like they're going directly after our dollars?
It does sound that way, but we knew that as soon as they announced this big budget, epic Green Lantern show for HBO Max. We knew we were going to spend all the money, and now they are just further cementing the fact that this is why isn't this going to be a launch show? Damn it! HBO Max launches in 4 months. Why won't this be available at launch? I want
it now. I do too. I want it now, and I want. I want it, is what I'm saying. I don't want my phone call. I want my Green Lantern show right now. Give it to me now, and give it to me at the highest possible quality. I want it to be cast, written, made, and the CGI to be done by the time the service comes out in a couple months. So give me what I want, give it to me now, and make it the best possible. That's all I ask. Is that too much to ask, Nick?
No, I don't think so at all.
Now, this is so great. They're telling me everything I want to hear about Sinestro being involved. Two Green Lanterns spanning decades, which, as you know, is like storytelling crack for me after my love of True Detective. I'm such a sucker for any kind of story that takes that narrative approach. I've learned. Jason Aaron's Thor is a great example. Who are the Green Lanterns going to... Let's do some speculation here. Who are the Green Lanterns going to be in this show? The primary.
Okay. Yeah, it's tough because on the one hand, you would think that if they're still going to do the Jeff Johns movie, that in all likelihood they would want to save Hal and John or whoever for that film. But if you're going to tell the story of Sinestro and the show is going to span multiple decades, doesn't it kind of have to be Hal Jordan?
I think it probably does, and that's what brings me to my theory. My theory is that the movie is going to focus on Jon Stewart now, and that the show is going to feature, because the story here speculates that it'll be Hal and John. I don't think so. I think the show will feature Hal, and I have two possible theories on the other Green Lantern. Perhaps the other part of the show is the origin story of Sinestro as a Green Lantern, or if it's spanning multiple decades, perhaps it's Hal Jordan and Jessica Cruz who are the primary stars of the Green Lantern show. I do think they're going to want to have some diversity. I do think they're going to want to also have a dichotomy of characterizations here, and certainly there are no two Earth Green Lanterns probably more diametrically opposite of one another than Jessica and Hal, in terms of you think of how confident and cocky and self-assured that Hal is, at least on the outside, and then how anxious and nervous and neurotic that Jessica Cruz is. So that's my official prediction. I think it's going to be Hal and Jessica as your key characters here. What are your thoughts, Nick?
I think it'll be Hal and Kyle.
Oh, interesting. Now, let me throw out what would be a fun wild card. If Hal and John are going to be in the movie, Guy Gardner and Jessica Cruz.
What if this is just literally telling the story of Hal and the subsequent Lanterns who have interacted with Sinestro? And what if it's Hal and we see like the introductions of John, Kyle, and Guy over the course of the show as the Sinestro thing plays out, and then the movie is just the latest iteration. It's Simon and Jessica.
Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. I like it, man. I just can't wait. And I'm going to say this as well. This will tie into our next topic very nicely. Damn it. Give David Ramsey his chance. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. Yep. Oh, and also a little bit of odd fantasy casting that you and I came up with finishing The Mandalorian. I am now advocating for Bill Burr as Guy Gardner.
I can see it. David Ramsey is John. Bill Burr is Guy. I mean, what's not to love? Well, nonetheless, that is the end of the rundown. And as usual, that means that it's time on our show to get to a segment where we tell you what we've been reading, what we've been watching. Why, it's a segment that we like to call Reading and Watching.
What you been reading and watching?
Well, Nick, I'm sure that neither you nor I have been reading anything.
No.
But we have been watching some things. So let's get right into it. This week was the finale, the two-part finale of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the much ballyhooed crossover event. We were talking about it last month. They took the damn month-long break, which I still think is a bad move. But they took the month-long break, and they came back and they finished it up. We had effusive praise, of course, for this crossover, and it's finally it's been completed. Oliver Queen became the Spectre. By the way, spoilers ahoy! I'll put that in the description this week. Spoilers ahoy on this. We will be talking spoilers on Crisis on Infinite Earths. If you haven't seen it, watch it before you listen to whatever we're about to say. Oliver becomes the Spectre, sacrifices himself. Once again dies, makes the ultimate sacrifice to restart the multiverse in a unique way, creating Earth Prime in the process, which is the mashing together of all of the Arrowverse Earths, the Black Lightning Earth, the Supergirl Earth, Earths, all the other Earths that were involved with Earth 1. They're all mashed together now. We don't know exactly what the changes are as a result, similar to the aftermath of Flashpoint earlier in the Arrowverse, but we do know that there are some significant changes. Everybody is living on the same planet alongside one another. And this was a love letter in many ways to DC Comics. Lots of Easter eggs, lots of allusions. Marv Wolfman got to write the first part of this two-part finale and also made a cameo in the second part of it, who was the legendary, of course, writer of the original Crisis on Infinite Earths in the comics. We got to see interactions between characters who are not often to interact with one another. Lex Luthor is now beloved by the people and considered Earth's greatest philanthropist. He even wins the Nobel Peace Prize while still being the same Lex in actuality that we all know and loathe. There are changes here and there. They fixed some of the after effects of Flashpoint, where Diggle now has his daughter Sarah back, but also still has John Jr. He now has 2 children. Superman and Lois, we find out, now have 2 children. We don't know the full extent of all the changes, like I mentioned, but it was an emotional 2-parter. Lots of laughs to be had. Some great lines from the likes of Diggle, the Legends crew, Ray Palmer. But nonetheless, it's over. It's finally over. I got to be honest, Nick. It feels weird. It feels weird that Crisis is finally over.
It does, and it especially like. I don't want to sound like I'm being negative because I loved the last 2 episodes, but it felt like a lot of the things that I was expecting to play out over 2 episodes really played out in episode 4. Because I was thinking that what we got in episode 5 was really going to be the foundation for the back half of all these seasons, like exploring those ramifications and getting all that. And they kind of burned through that really quickly, which is interesting because it almost felt like they were in a hurry to go ahead and get to whatever their new status quo was going to be instead of milking it out for several episodes. So love this conclusion. Oliver, continues to get great heroic sacrifice moments. My only complaint there is Diggle needed to be present for one of those deaths. If you're going to kill him twice, give him that moment with Diggle, although you and I both think there might be something still coming down the road.
Yeah, I have to think that there's a story reason for that they wanted Diggle to have that moment of doubt, that moment of thinking that he has failed his brother, that he has let him down, which was a great scene, by the way. David Ramsey was sensational in this episode. But I have to believe that they're going to, in the final episode of Arrow, which we know we have 2 episodes left. One is a backdoor pilot to Green Arrow and the Black Canaries. The other will be the true finale of Arrow, and I have to believe that there's going to be a scene between John Diggle and Oliver Queen in that episode that will allow us to get some finality. But a great death here. I thought this was much better than the first sort of half death that they gave him back in the first episode of Crisis. That scene, because this scene did have Barry, but it also had Sarah Lance there, and Sarah, as we were talking about earlier, they've gotten away from it in the Arrowverse because of her role in Legends of Tomorrow, but Sarah does have a strong bond with Oliver. Going back to the very beginning of the Arrowverse, she was on the boat that started all this stuff. And so I really appreciated them giving Sarah an emotional thread with Oliver, which for whatever reason it felt like they've kind of avoided ever since they started the Legends of Tomorrow show. And I love them kind of reminding us that, yes, these 2 characters have a bond and they always will. So that was great.
Did that not feel like they were almost setting up Sarah? Like, I was expecting at the end of this Crisis that we would unquestionably have Barry and Kara as the leaders of the Arrowverse going forward. And it almost felt like Sarah was being given that spot more so than Kara.
Now, that is interesting because, everything up to now has felt like Barry and Kara were the 2 leads. And most people thought Barry, Kara, and Kate would be the big 3. But they seem to be saying in this episode that no, Sarah is going to be a big part of that equation at the very least as well. There's a couple of possibilities in that. I think the possibility that mainly they're just trying to give a little bit of a rub to Legends of Tomorrow to remind people that it is still important. And then maybe I've kind of been wondering this, and I've read, I should be clear, I've read no speculation on this. Supergirl gets very good ratings from what I understand. However, it makes me wonder with them greenlighting a Superman show if perhaps maybe Melissa Benoist has given them indications that maybe she doesn't want to do it much longer. And so maybe this is them kind of.
I have wondered how a Superman show and a Supergirl show are going to coexist independently of one another. And yes, you're going to have the marriage and kids angle on Superman that they're going to lean heavily into, but like, I think we've both sometimes criticized Supergirl for feeling not distinct enough. Like, it just feels like they're doing Superman stories with her and questioning like what distinguishes her character from Clark's. And so this will be interesting to see how they coexist going forward. Maybe you're right, but that's not been reported. There's been no indication of that. But it makes you wonder if the CW doesn't perhaps know something. Although they just handed down renewals to Supergirl for next season, so.
It's all very interesting. I don't know, but I noticed that as well. They were really putting Sarah up front and center, which is fair because she really has kind of been, even on her own show, has almost felt like she's been kind of pushed in the background a little bit the last couple seasons to focus on some of the other characters as main characters. So that was cool. Mick Rory was a highlight, as he always is on here. Any favorite moments from the 2-part finale?
Oh man, I mean the Oliver death as we discussed. Although I'm a little iffy on how exactly do you kill the Spectre. That was I didn't fully understand that, but nonetheless, that was great. Getting the big Black Lightning return was great, and then of course the Justice League table near the end was also
and giving Oliver the spot there at the table, even though he's in death, and also this new universe, Oliver being the first hero, the one that kickstarts everything. I think that's really cool. So yeah, I would throw all of those were great. I would say one of my favorite moments was Diggle delivering the metal line, "I'm never letting my kids watch this show again," as Bebo is rampaging through the streets. I thought that was really funny. I thought the interactions between and we have to draw attention to the thing that's gotten this episode the most attention, the wildest cameo in the history of the Arrowverse, which is Barry Allen of the CW verse, Grant Gustin, encountering Ezra Miller, the movie Justice League version of The Flash, in what appears to be his version of Star Labs. Nobody knew this was coming. This didn't leak ahead of time miraculously, and apparently it was all due to Jim Lee getting involved and saying, "Look, I want to make this happen." That's according to Guggenheim. So our feelings about Ezra Miller aside, which we'll talk about in a second, how in the world, how surprised were you when you saw this, Nick?
Pretty damn surprised. No one saw it coming. Even though there had been weird, reports that we thought were all bullshit, that this was a possibility, that there was going to be some sort of DCEU tie, this was still a little bit expected. And I must admit, a bit of disappointment when Ezra Miller's Flash wasn't, antimatter red waved away, never to be heard from again.
Yeah.
Because, man, that scene reminded me of everything I hate about that interpretation.
It's interesting because it was a cute little scene, but, when I was watching it, I came away with the same thought, Nick, that, while it was really fun and it was entertaining and there wasn't anything he did in that scene that was bad necessarily, but I watched it and I was like, okay, first of all, it exposes how much better the TV suit is. The movie suit is utterly ridiculous with all the armor pieces everywhere. That they called attention to that, how much better Grant Gustin looks as the Flash than Ezra Miller does. It also called attention to the fact that Grant Gustin should be the big screen Flash. We're harping on it. We've harped on it. We've beaten it into the ground at this point, but it's true. It's just true. Grant Gustin has done nothing but prove what a good actor he is the whole time he's been on this show. He's inhabited this character. He deserves the chance to play him on the big screen, and he's not going to get that chance, and it's a shame.
It really is. I know there was no way to do it because of all the things that, all the disparate elements at play and all the different shows and movies and whatnot. You couldn't bring something like Joaquin Phoenix's Joker into the same earth as the DC, on CW shows, but there was a part of me that wished they were going to do the true Crisis on Infinite Earths approach and just consolidate everything into one Earth. And I know why it couldn't happen, but man, it would have been cool.
Sure would have been cool. But that was a wild and incredible cameo. That the usage.
Imagine them doing that, Greg, and then revealing that Ezra Miller's Flash still exists, but he's just called Wally West instead of Barry Allen.
There you go. There you go.
Since he acts like Wally West anyway.
There you go. No problem with that. And yeah, I mean, what a way to fix things too across. But again, it would require them viewing the TV universe as being worthy of being on the big screen, which I don't think they do. Nonetheless, I think Marc Guggenheim and company deserve a damn round of applause for bringing us this crossover, doing what Warner Brothers has never had the competence to do. A story of this scope and this magnitude has never been done on the big screen with DC characters, and they managed to do it on the small screen.
Well, but they did it because they took their time. They built up an attachment and an emotional investment over 7 years. Like, this was 7 years, 8 years in the making, and they took their time, and they weren't in a hurry to get to it. Like, if this were the film universe of a couple of years ago, they would have done this as, like, the second movie, even though we hadn't had time to get attached to these characters, and we wouldn't have cared. You know, that's the big thing.
Think about the fact that this is the biggest, in terms of scope, in terms of imagination, in terms of, holy hell, how are we going to pull this together? This is the biggest project ever involving live-action DC Comics properties, and it didn't involve Batman.
Yep.
I mean, that in and of itself tells you how, for all the crap that people want to give the TV shows for, they're hokey, or they're low budget, or whatever, soap operas or whatever, they got it right. And they found a way to tell their story and to tell it the right way on a shoestring budget, in a way that the bigwigs at Warner Brothers Entertainment and Warner Pictures have never been able to do. So kudos to Guggenheim. Kudos to the whole cast and crew of Crisis on Infinite Earths. I thought it was a rousing success, the best crossover yet. I think if I were nitpicking, I didn't love the confrontation between Spectre and Anti-Monitor just because I thought it should have lasted longer. They kind of have a test of strength, you know? But that's kind of a nitpick. Other than that,
now there was nobody. The Anti-Monitor was never on his knees before.
That's true. That's a good point. But I thought it was a masterpiece in many ways. It was the best crossover yet. I can't wait to see how it affects things moving forward. Can't wait to see what we get for next year's crossover. How do they follow this up? You know, it's. I thought it was great, man, and it feels weird that it's happened, but I'm glad it did.
Absolutely.
Well, and with that being said, I think that's oh, no, we have to talk about, we promised it earlier in the show. So last week, as you know, we went back and watched the pilot episode of Arrow, and then a funny thing happened after we watched that pilot episode. We just kept it running on Netflix. And so Nick and I were kind of reawakened in our love of Arrow season 1, and now we are doing a full Arrow rewatch unofficially. We're not doing this for the podcast. We're doing this for our own enjoyment at our own pace. But I'm about 6 episodes into the first season. Nick has finished the first season already and is into the second season. We're rewatching the entire show of Arrow, and I gotta say, Nick, I know I'm only 6 episodes in, but it's reminding me of how damn great this show is and has been.
Yeah, season 1, I think, as we've discussed after rewatching it, I think we've forgotten just how damn good it was, and I think that's because of how good seasons 2 and 5, and, you know, in our estimation anyway, 3 were. We've slept on 1 a little bit, and going back and watching it, that period of time that we talked about before where it takes the show to kind of find itself, that period of time is much shorter than I remember it being, because by, like, episode 5 or 6, they have hit their stride, and they are on their way. And it's a damn solid first season, and I'm looking forward to continuing this rewatch.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like my memory of season 1 is that it takes like 8 episodes to find its footing. Not the case. Not the case at all. It's pretty quick, pretty early on in the season where it really finds its footing. And even when it hasn't found its footing, it's still pretty good. The characters are good. The cinematography is good. The action is outstanding. I love seeing Oliver Queen as this sort of, you know, broken man that he, you know, he is pushing the people closest to him away. He is behaving in a way that isn't the kind of Oliver that we would see in later seasons, where he's kind of softened himself and opened himself up, and we kind of see why certain characters react to him the way that they do, whether it be Tommy Merlin, whether it be his sister Thea, whether it be other characters around him. Because Oliver is very much broken inside. He's looking, and it throws me back to these early episodes, throw me back to that scene in season 5 when he finally breaks and he confesses to Adrian that he killed people because he wanted to and he liked it. And at times you get that feeling early on the show that Oliver, he's not going out murdering people necessarily, but he's not thinking twice if he has to put an arrow through somebody's chest. So interesting.
One other thing I picked up on my rewatch of season 1, when you get late into the season, there's a flashback scene between Malcolm Merlyn and Robert Queen where they're talking about the Glades, and Malcolm Merlyn says to Robert Queen, "You know what the Glades took from me. It took my wife, and I know the Glades took everything from you too." And they never say what that is. They leave that out there, and then years later they come back and build the Amico storyline off of it, which is just remarkable.
Yeah. Excellent work here early on, and as we continue the podcast, we will continue to update you on our rewatch of Arrow as we go along with it, and kind of its standing in superhero television shows. I think both Nick and I feel season 1 is way better than I remembered it being, and it certainly stands out as one of the, to this point, to 2012, maybe the best season of live action superhero television we'd gotten to that point. So we'll have to discuss more once I get through with season 1. But nonetheless, that will wrap up reading and watching. And I can't help but look at my Ho Ho Loon watch that I have purchased over the holidays. A great gift, by the way, that you can buy on Nowhere. But it's telling me that it's time for the Wrestling Minute. Well, boy, there's been a lot of wrestling that we haven't been talking about lately, Nick, and we can't get into all of it by any means, but let's talk a little bit about Wrestle Kingdom. That was a couple weeks ago, and we haven't...
Yeah, we did. We watched that
we
together.
We had a little gathering at the Phillips compound and watched Wrestle Kingdom, and it was the first 2-night Wrestle Kingdom event, and boy, Nick, it really lit a fire under me. I thoroughly enjoyed the whole presentation.
Absolutely, and here's my big takeaway from this. New Japan is a product, Greg, that you and I watch, I think we would say infrequently, because there is no weekly television component, at least not from an episodic standpoint. Yes, there was the Access show for a while, but it was just
matches,
matches, yeah. And so we don't spend time with it the way we do WWE or AEW or NXT or what have you. But I find it very remarkable that, like, if you were making a list of, like, the 5 biggest moments from, like, the last decade that have made me legitimately emotional in wrestling, like, 2 or 3 of those have come from New Japan. Where, I mean, Kenny Omega finally beating Kazuchika Okada at Dominion a couple years ago and winning the title, for example, is a legitimately emotional moment. And yet, relatively speaking, I haven't spent that much time with the Kenny Omega character. But the way they've done it, the way they did it, I mean, was just a masterpiece. And this year is no exception, with seeing Tetsuya Naito finally get his moment to become unquestionably the guy in New Japan was a moment that has been built to. And despite the fact that I've only spent a fraction of the time with Tetsuya Naito that I have with many WWE or AEW guys, it felt important, and it felt big, and it provided something that me as a longtime fan, I get so rarely in wrestling these days, a legitimate charge of emotion. It happens so infrequently that I have to heap massive praise when it does come, and New Japan seems to be providing that, arguably in terms of time investment, at a higher rate than anybody else on the planet.
Yeah, I echo all those sentiments. I'm someone that has not even been the biggest Naito fan, and even I found myself getting emotional at finally seeing him get his moment after all he's been through. And I think you touched upon something that I think New Japan does better than anybody, which is they don't overthink pro wrestling.
Right.
It's crazy that, as you mentioned, we interact infrequently with the New Japan product. I've got like 10 episodes, the last 10 episodes of New Japan on Access on my DVR that I haven't watched. So I'm not up to date on all the storylines. I read stuff here and there to keep up with what's going on, watch big shows when I can, and big matches when I can. But I don't watch it every week. I don't watch it every month even. But when I tuned into Wrestle Kingdom, New Japan, whether it was video packages, whether it was the commentary was a big part of this, New Japan does a better job than anyone else, and I'm including WWE, I'm including AEW, I'm including Ring of Honor, I'm including Indies. New Japan does a better job than anyone of making their product accessible to new watchers. You watch that show, and the stories aren't complicated. It's not this guy is back from the dead, or this guy is this guy is becoming a religious cultist after being a hero to millions for a while, after being a member of a mercenary force. It's yes, there's good guys and bad guys, and yes, they're fighting for titles, but it's stuff that you can process as a watcher, and it doesn't take you long to catch up. Like, I had not seen any of the build-up to Jericho and Tanahashi. They showed the video, and I got it. Jericho is the cocky, evil foreigner who's coming into Tanahashi's realm and trying to end his career. He's trying to add Tanahashi's name to his mantle of people that he's put away in his legendary career. And Tanahashi's saying, I ain't done yet. I'm still the ace. Makes sense. Kazuchika Okada has been the man in New Japan for what feels like an eternity now, even though he's so young. Naito's always been second best at best. Can Naito overcome the hump on 2 nights? Can he get in the title shot against Okada? And then can he beat him and prove that he's the man? This is basic human emotion. This is basic, I want to be the best storytelling. Will Ospreay and Hiromu. Will Ospreay has dominated New Japan for the last year. Hiromu's coming back from a devastating injury. Does Hiromu have anything left anymore? Does he have anything left in his body?
Yeah, Hiromu's not just coming back from a devastating injury, but took the pinfall in his first match back. And
is Hiromu the same Hiromu? Can he still perform? And is Will Ospreay so far evolved beyond what the New Japan Junior division was when Hiromu was there? This is basic story. And even in the match, when you see, Will Ospreay's almost just toying with him. Hiromu's not the same guy he was. And then you see him dig deep and win. And it creates emotion. It's just human nature for us to feel emotion about that. The other thing that New Japan does better than anyone else, Nick, is variety on their card. When you watch Wrestle Kingdom, I can't think of any 2 matches, especially once you get through the early portion, they're all tag matches. I can't think of any 2 matches back-to-back that were the same. You had a hardcore match with Moxley and Archer that was a death match. You had the junior heavyweight match with Will Ospreay and Hiromu. You have what were the 2 semi-mains that night? It was Jay White and Naito, which was this character heel versus babyface kind of match. And then you have the main event of Okada and Ibushi, which is your New Japan formula epic sports, bombs against each other sort of main event. Every match felt different from the other matches. And I thought that really made it stand out.
It sure did. Greg has been invaded apparently in the studio by a dog of some sort, but loved Wrestle Kingdom top to bottom. Great for Tetsuya Naito, and as we said, the big thing that New Japan does is it gives you that emotional moment, but then in the same breath as that emotional moment, it makes you go, "Oh my God, I can't wait to see what comes next," because you get the story of somebody being so selfish in the form of Kenta to take away this moment that the fans have waited arguably 4 years for, in the form of by having him interrupt Naito's title celebration at Wrestle Kingdom, which is something they typically New Japan does, reserved for New Year's Dash to set up the new angles. So that was great as well. All in on New Japan, and can't wait to see where they go from here. I hope Tetsuya Naito gets a lengthy reign. It's something that we've waited to see for a long time. I think it's important to his legacy to have him. He does. I mean, obviously nobody's going to have an Okada type reign, but I would think, at least a good, because again, in New Japan, title reigns are typically much longer anyway. I think a year, going at least to next Wrestle Kingdom.
Agreed completely. Well, with that being said, that's it for the Wrestling Minute, and things are wrapping up here at HTF. Any final thoughts to leave the listeners with, Nick?
Well, it's been a while, but we do have good old JR, Hall of Famer, WWE Hall of Famer Jim Ross back with us. Been a while, JR. I know he was very excited about having his Christmas and New Year's off, and then has been very busy with his AEW schedule. And as a matter of fact, I heard a rumor, JR, that most recently, or very recently on AEW, you guys kind of honored the legends of Memphis wrestling. And I heard that you went out on the town in Memphis that night after you left South Haven, Mississippi. And I heard you, you got a little action. Got to use your Blue Chew that night.
Well, I did, Nick. I did. Thank you very much. Obviously, it's very nice to be back in the studio. It's been a while here for old JR. Been doing a lot of thinking about my Oklahoma Sooners, Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch, defensive coordinator. Certainly, we got woodshedded in playoffs, but quite frankly, it's still a successful season. Still proud of my team, Boomer Sooner. But, an interesting thing happened that night in that night in Memphis. And I spent a night in you one time too, Nick. That was fun. But that night in Memphis was really interesting for the King and I. It went a little something like this, Nick. I hitchhiked up to Memphis as a young boy in my prime. I thought the big old city would ease my Oklahoma mind. After just 1 hour, I met this southern gentleman in a singlet. He said, they called me the King of Memphis. And then, damn if he didn't become my broadcast partner and take me around the world. I saw stars dancing on the water. I heard the honky-tonk man singing Blue Suede Shoe. That old muddy river was my witness. That night, I fell in love with the Queen of Memphis. I woke up the next morning a prisoner of his charm. He showed me some things now that I'd never been shown back on my farm in Oklahoma. He set my soul on fire, Jack. He completed all of my dreams. A boy became a man that night in the arms of the Memphis King. Well, that's about the time that I saw stars dancing on the water. I heard Elvis and the Honky Tonk Man together now, singing Blue Suede Shoe. That old muddy river where Austin threw the Rock's Intercontinental title was my witness. And that night was the night that I fell in love with the King of Memphis, Jerry Law. King of Memphis, King of Memphis. Just like that old man river, he keeps rolling through my mind. And I won't forget his ass, because he was one of a kind. I saw stars dancing on the water. I heard superstar Bill Dundee singing Blue Suede Shoe. That old muddy river where Bob Holly and Billy Gunn fought for the hardcore title was my witness. And that night, I fell in love with the King of Memphis. I saw more stars dancing on the water. The night I fell in love. 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 Well, I heard the Honky Tonk Man. I did. I heard Bill Dundee. I heard Austin Idol. I heard all the superstars of Memphis wrestling dancing on the water. And once again, I have to reiterate this, I heard the Honky Tonk Man singing Blue Suede Shoe. That old muddy river was my witness. The night that I fell in love with the King of Memphis. One of the greatest psychologists in our industry. A man that knew how to do more with less. Anyway, that was the night I fell in love with the King of Memphis, Nick.
Our traveling fanboys, 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 our traveling fanboys.